Hello and welcome to the Tech Remedy podcast. I'm Jamie and I'm passionate about seeing businesses win using technology. In each episode, we'll talk to industry experts or business owners just like you. We'll uncover how technology is being used in the real world. Don't forget to subscribe and follow me on LinkedIn for more insight and content to come. Gavin, welcome to the Tech Remedy podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I'm sure lots of people will know you already, as you've got a wide reach on LinkedIn. We've already talked about it a bit, but for those that don't, you're the MD of Howarths, a business that helps SMEs navigate HR, employment law, health and safety, and business immigration law. Yeah. And you specialize in keeping people compliant, but improving performance through people and culture.
Yes, perfectly put.
Good, great. I guess that's a natural starting point then. Can you tell me a little bit more about Howarths, maybe what I've missed or what your role is and how you kind of developed into the role you've got now?
Yeah, so the backstory to Howarths is my mum and dad started the business, Andy and Helen, 21 years ago in Cleckheaton. Grew the business organically. It's always been organic growth. Helping one SME at a time, and it's very much SMEs we work with, not big corporates. And was very successful in doing that. Started with employment law, latterly added health and safety, and then what we call HR growth.
Yep.
I qualified as a solicitor in Leeds and joined the business 14 years ago. I've been running it for the last 11 years as MD, and then bought mum and dad out about 3 years ago. So there's 30 of us in the business, including the foundation, which my dad runs, Andy. And we work with about 600 businesses. Some employ 3 or 4 staff at the smallest end, up to 700 at the biggest end, in any different sector. Because ultimately, it doesn't matter, people are people. Yep. And that gives a sort of scope and context of the business. And we're a very values-led business, so our 4 values are graft, together, heart and grit, which very Yorkshire.
Yeah.
But they define really all the decisions that we make, the types of clients we attract, and also the people who want to work at Howarths.
I think sometimes it's when you learn about a company and you learn about the values and you see what they preach, it's sometimes hard to see how they eat their own dog food and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But for me, it was obvious when I saw you guys on LinkedIn. I met Jonathan at a networking event, and I learned more about you just from looking outside in, that those values were really clear, and I could really see and feel that you live them day to day, which I think is a core part of obviously what you do for clients as well, and helping them with that same people and culture aspect.
Yeah.
Being a family business, is that part of that DNA, do you think, or is that something you work really hard to have brought in?
No, 100%. Yeah, I mean, I think the values of the family have translated into the values of the business, and those values. I mean, you're right to say that because, and thanks for your comments about the business and the values, and we've worked hard on that deliberately, and almost done it the other way around to a lot of other businesses. You know, I've walked into so many businesses over the years that have values on the wall, but you only have to be in that business for 5 minutes to know that they're not lived out.
Yeah.
Where we've always been a very values-led business, but it's only in the last 2 or 3 years that we've articulated them in the way we have. So whilst we've been going for 21 and making decisions very values-led, it's taken a lot of years for us to work out exactly what those are, develop them as a team, and then finally put them on the wall, as a representation of what is actually there, rather than putting them on and then trying to,
work backwards.
So, it's worked well for us.
It definitely shows through. And I think we had a chat in the past and you said, look, if you're a legal person and you want to come work for us, we're more a Greggs and Wetherspoons kind of place based in Cleckheaton than a cocktails after work place that you go to in a big city like Leeds. So.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're based in Cleckheaton. The family, we're all from Cleckheaton. And we've had discussions at board level as to should we move into Leeds, the second or third biggest legal centre in the country. The glass walls and bright lights of Leeds. But in the end, it didn't take us long to decide, well, no, because this is who we are.
Yep.
And there needs to be an authenticity as to who we are as a business, and the location for that's important. And when we're recruiting, we're a distinct choice. And that line, I used it a few times. In fact, I went to an event the other day, Kirklees Top 100,
Yep.
and the compere, before I got on to do a little speech, said, I think Gavin came up with the best one-liner I've heard in ages, last year's event. So let's see if we can match it this year.
Right.
I was like, damn, I'm going to use the same one. But yeah, I do often say that, welcome to Clackheaton, anyone not been, yeah, well, welcome, we've got a Greggs and a Wetherspoon, so you'll be well at home, and it just gives an idea of, we're down to earth. And that's what's most importantly suits our client base as well.
Yeah. And we'll get into tech and kind of the alignment there in a bit, but in terms of then throughout that period of like your growth and your journey, has the importance of people and culture changed? Like, was it important on day one as it is now, or like the way the world is now, is it more needed and should it be more focused on for businesses because it's harder to compete as a business and stand out, or how do you feel about that?
Yeah, 100%. So for us, it's always been top of the agenda. So it was very high up mum and dad's agenda that people should be treated right and build an employee-led culture. I've taken that on and done it in my own way, but with the same principles that mum and dad started with. And so it's always been very important. And I would say it's the number one reason why we've enjoyed the growth and success that we have over, say, the last 10, 12, even 20 years, is because we've focused on that. And I think for other businesses, I think it is becoming more prevalent now to do that. And I think there's a second generation of leaders, I think, that realise the importance of it. And if you think of the last 5 years, we've had Brexit, COVID, we've got AI, which I'm sure we'll talk about more, ESG, environmental social governance, the new CSR, if you like. These have all come in the last 5-6 years, which has totally changed the landscape for businesses. And you're right, you hear this term a lot, a war on talent, and there's less talent out there. And I think that's right, particularly in certain industries. And I know in the tech industry, it's difficult to get good tech people. So I would say that's a supply and demand issue. So if there's less supply, demand's higher, we have to work harder. So employers out there who are serious about recruiting the best talent and keeping it in the business have to work harder. And boards have to look at themselves. What are we doing to attract the best talent? Just putting a job advert out there and hoping for the best ain't good enough anymore.
No.
So that's a lot of what I do on LinkedIn, is try and fling the doors open to Howarths, be transparent, share a little bit about what we're like. And the utopia I think we're aiming for, I would say, is top line revenue, bottom line profit, return to shareholders. Yes, that's a given. We're a business. And though, a great place to work with a queue of people outside the door wanting to work there. That's not easy to do. And it's a vision that I don't think we ever quite reach, but we upwardly strive for. And the best businesses do. So, but to create a great place to work that makes good money and has a queue of people outside the door, you've got to work hard for that. So I think those businesses that take that seriously now in 2024 and beyond are the ones that win.
Yeah. I think we obviously work harder than ever in that. And you mentioned about the tech space with things like remote working and COVID changing people's maybe perceptions of where they can work on what sort of life they want. In our world, location shouldn't matter. Everything's remote on 99% of it. So you're all of a sudden not just competing with people in your local area. And we couldn't use the same analogy of Clackheaton and we stand for this, because now we're recruiting people maybe from across the country, or even across the world. We've got a starter that started in South Africa this year. So it's positive because we can go further afield, but at the same time, people have more options than ever, and it's finding that balance of standing out. So I think we certainly try to work harder than we've ever had to try and attract and retain talent. There's probably a good lead to technology then, and how technology fits in. You mentioned COVID. Obviously, that was a massive driving force of remote working. Companies might have adopted it before, but not been 100% behind it, or it was just bits here and there. Whereas now I think the post-COVID world is accepted. Remote working is here to stay, and the technology and the way we work needs to fit to keep people happy and to work towards culture and bringing people together.
Yeah.
Even when they might be remote. So what do you do at Howarths? Or how do you find technology fits within the people and culture sort of element?
Yeah, I think there's clearly a big role for technology in building a high performance culture. You know, even for the most simplest thing of doing mundane jobs, let's say, can be demoralizing.
Yeah.
You know, which isn't good for culture, obviously. So if we can use technology to do those types of jobs, and AI will come on to that has that role as well, then that can improve engagement levels, improve productivity, etc. So there's clearly a big role there in fostering a high performance culture. I mean, in terms of the home working thing, look, I think I very much like the Daniel Pink model of motivating and engaging people, which is across 3 strands really: autonomy, mastery and purpose.
Yeah.
So the autonomy bit speaks to the location of where you work, but the location is only one part. You know, sovereignty over what you do, when you do it, how you do it, the where is a factor, but it's more than that as well. So at Howarths, yeah, we have hybrid working, we do, but we don't have anyone. In fact, no, we do. We have two, but it's a minority who work remotely full time.
Yeah.
Because one of our values is together.
Okay.
And it's difficult to say together without people being together physically. So we do have hybrid, and we have, out of 30 of us, we probably have 20 different working patterns. So because we try and bend the business around the individual and meet halfway. So yes, hybrid is here to stay. The tech really helps us to be able to do that.
Yeah.
But we blend it in a way that makes sure there's a lot of human interaction in there as well.
Do you feel like there's anything you have to work on to remove some of the negativity around technology and the way that information's always readily available nowadays? Like, I know personally, I've turned off all notifications on my phone, Teams, Outlook, because the amount of noise that you're getting all the time, you can never actually switch off. And running your own business can be hard enough to switch off and have boundaries, but when something that you use or you have in your hand all the time has got all the information, it can be even harder to ignore it once you've seen it.
Yeah, 100%. I've got 2 points on that. I think the first is, previously when the technology wasn't there, if you couldn't check your emails, you know, or you couldn't access them. So the decision was taken out of your hands because it just wasn't an option to do that. Now, of course, you can check them at any point, at any time. So the difference now is you have to set a boundary yourself and be intentional about doing that. If you don't, you just get sucked in. It's insidious, really. And I think particularly if you work at home a lot, because the boundaries then become soft and you don't exactly know, and you can often work longer. So I think you have to be very deliberate about setting a boundary. And I think the other point you make is right. So I've experienced recently, if I come out of a meeting, say I've been in a meeting for 3 hours, get my phone out, I'll have a range of voicemails, emails, text messages, LinkedIn messages, WhatsApps, all business related across, say, 5 or 6 channels. I mean, I'm happy that I'm needed, but it's quite a lot. Like, it can be very overwhelming to, you know, the spread of business into WhatsApp, I think, has been the last 2 or 3 years. But yeah, exactly. Like, if you don't set those boundaries, it's coming from all angles.
I think WhatsApp mentioning that is a like, I personally try and stay off WhatsApp for anything work related. I know I attended one of your events where they spoke about the fact that what you deem as personal, WhatsApp, if there's company like chat and company elements on there, you've got a liability as a business owner to make sure that it's not safeguarded, but it's protected and people are using it in the right way.
Absolutely.
Which I never realised about. And then I think for me, it makes it even harder to blur those lines when all of a sudden WhatsApp, you might text one of your mates or your missus and then you see this stuff. So do you have to, where does the Howarths like service lay when you speak to a client? You might have a traditional business owner who wants as much as they can get all the time and not really prioritize people and culture too much. Like, would you shape how they communicate and what tools they use? Is that something that a house service would provide you that, like, this is what you should kind of do? Or are you kind of more just hands off, like, this is the ideal, but we're here to work with you guys?
I think, is it right to say that the best service providers would adapt to the needs of the customer as far as possible?
Yeah.
So you're right, you have a range of businesses that view the people side very differently.
Yeah.
And that's fair enough as well. You know, I can think of a few that I've met where, let's say there's two sides to HR to simplify it, reactive and proactive. Your reactive is, if you employ people, there's going to be fires every now and then. Help us put them out quickly and efficiently so we don't end up stood in front of an employment tribunal judge at its core. And then your proactive is when a business starts to answer questions like, what's our employer brand proposition? How do we recruit better? How do we onboard better, induct better, performance manage, engagement levels, all that good stuff. Now, the appetite for the proactive depends very much on the owner, the board, and what type of business they want to be.
Yeah.
For some, just staying compliant is all they need to do. As long as I'm not getting sued, that'll do me, Gav.
Yeah.
Fair enough, we'll help you just with that then. Whereas others, but I do think what I would say on that is fine, and that might be a business owner who's exiting in the next 2 to 3 years. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
But for the long term, I think those businesses are going to struggle.
Yeah.
It's going to be a problem. So yeah, and as to your point about technology and communication, yes, exactly. It's funny when I think about AI, for example, the adoption of AI, and there's lots of talk about it. If I looked across our client base, across Yorkshire and West Yorkshire, how many businesses adopt AI in any material or significant way? I'd say very few. We go into lots of businesses even now that have filing cabinets with HR documents in.
Yeah.
So never mind AI, like a HR software system first.
Yeah.
Or even having those filing cabinets in some sort of order. So there's a
step to go through. It's funny you say that. So I was at a Microsoft event last week, and one of the stats that came out of their research was 66% of companies are using AI, but they don't know about it. And what they meant was it hadn't been discussed, it hadn't been decided at a business level, we're going to use this, but staff were bringing it in. Staff knew that there was ChatGPT or other AIs they could make use of here and there. So all the business didn't realize it was creeping in already, and they hadn't really controlled it. So it became a problem.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and I think we're at that point now where I think people have realised AI is here. It's not necessary all evil, and we need to find a way to work with it. I know within the legal sector, you've probably got to treat it completely differently to a non-regulated industry, but I think it's important it's discussed top down at the minute. We've got a few clients where we get tickets in and it's can we do this and this, but they haven't really thought about the big picture and how it's going to fit. So I guess you guys must struggle because the legal laws and all that sort of stuff generally is quite slow to adapt and change.
Yeah.
And AI is so fast moving. I guess, how do you handle that? How do you see that working?
Yeah, I mean, I won't profess to be an expert on the legal implications of AI, but you clearly, the points you touch on are GDPR, privacy, ethics, which are all high on the agenda clearly in the legal industry, and the way you use AI. I think on the HR front, though, there's a couple of different things. Streamlining HR processes is clearly an obvious benefit of AI. And I feel like an AI optimist, It's great. I'm not worried about it taking over people. It's just how do you adopt the technology to create efficiencies and productivity and complement that with the creativity of people. And in HR, I think there's a little bit of that. So, for example, on an employee engagement survey, you'll ask a series of questions of what the employee thinks about the business. And within that survey will be open questions where the employee can free type their responses. So say you have a business with 80 people, every member of the team writes out free worded answers. The AI then will read all those answers and produce a report and summarize.
Yeah.
Now that is a great adoption of AI.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're having to read 80 answers yourself,
Yeah.
try and collate them and put them into some sort of summary report,
Yeah.
which is a big job.
Yeah.
So, and I went to an event last week and there was talk of AI on the recruitment process. So you say, here are the things we're looking for and we need. You've got 100 CVs, the AI scans it all
Yeah.
and produces the answer. So there's another efficiency there. And there was even a product that was talked about which would scan the internet to find everything about that person.
Yeah.
Might be scary for some listeners. Across all social media channels, everything it can find
Yeah.
to work out whether that person is a values fit.
Yeah.
So never mind the technical skills, but from a values point of view, based on everything the AI can find, is that fit? So there's plenty of things happening in the HR field from an AI perspective, and there's more coming down the track. But I think it mainly can be summarised, particularly for the SME market, as streamlining processes. I don't see, for example, at the moment, like Amazon using AI to check the staff at fulfillment centres, and if they haven't reached a certain criteria, automatically dismissing them. I don't see that in the SME market, particularly in our world, anytime soon. But streamlining processes, for sure.
I think that you've hit the nail on the head with that. Like Microsoft's approach and the Copilot is their AI. It's all around like empowering people to do things and not necessarily replacing them. There are going to be industries that are more sort of susceptible to like more tasks being automated and replaced than others. But I think the mentality you need to have is just empowering people and helping them do more sort of quicker, or even to your point before about people having really tedious parts of the job. In our world, if it's really hard to recruit people, can we make their lives easier and more enjoyable by taking away a really tedious part of their work?
Yeah.
So, for example, like with ticket triage, when it comes in, it used to be the apprentice's job to go through and prioritize, categorize, and do all that. And AI now does that here, so they don't have that painstaking part of the job, and they can do more kind of engaging activities.
Yeah.
And I think you're right in terms of the big organizations in this world have the ability to deploy really bespoke, really well-developed AIs. But for the SME market, what I tend to find is when I go in and speak to a company, AI's all in the media. We want to do this and this. But you look, and like you said earlier, you've still got stuff in a filing cabinet.
Yeah.
You haven't utilized the tools you've already got. And I think most people probably use 10, 15% of the Microsoft 365 environment.
Yeah.
And you probably should start there before you run with AI.
100%. I say that to boards all the time from a HR perspective. It's like there's no point talking about a fancy employee engagement survey if you haven't got contracts of employment. So let's start where we are and build from
out.
there. Yeah, 100%.
And I think the other thing I'd say, into your points, are sometimes we talk about AI, but we really mean automation.
Yes.
Obviously, automation is that underlying tool, isn't it, of automating process or slicking up a process.
Yeah.
When you add AI to it, it then can turbocharge that. So
yes, good point. I think the other points I thought about AI, and I can see why HR would be nervous about it, is because it's employee data, isn't it? And the ethics, privacy, GDPR around such sensitive personal data has to be carefully thought about, really. If you're trying to use AI to read HR records to create summaries of behaviours.
Yeah.
I think we ought to be very slow and careful to adopt that type of thing, because we're talking about a data body which includes very sensitive, important, personal information.
Yeah.
And of course, I think like you referenced, the data has to be pristine as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
For the AI to work.
Yeah.
So that's another point, is start where you are, because if your data isn't pristine, what are you going to get from your AI?
Exactly, yeah. If you've already biased it with the data set you put into it, your outputs aren't going to be usable.
Yeah.
And I think your point's valid again. Like, once you put something in an AI, it's out there. You can't take it back. And this is where you have to be careful what type of AI you use. So if you're using an AI where it's in I guess premium's not the right word, but in a premium paid for service, they'll ring fence that data and that where it lives and where it kind of is worked on. But using these free AIs, it's put in the public domain, it's put in public cloud. And if you're using sensitive data, there's no telling where that's going to end. And even subject data access requests.
Exactly.
I don't know how you'd even begin to unpick where that data was and how it was
Yes.
used. So,
And I think data breaches now are much more commonplace and in the public lexicon and understood. You know, so data subject access requests, that's something people will know about, you know, and they know they have a right to their data. So I think employers have to be very careful about that and the implications of any AI products with such a sensitive data set.
Yeah. I know you've trialed it at Howarths. What do you think would be your first, unless you're already using it, what would be your first area you'd focus on to deploy an AI, or to where do you think there's most benefit for you as a company right now?
Ooh, good question. I mean, one very simple, basic level adoption that we've used, which has been really good, is minute taking.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's for internal meetings or, you know, investigation meetings or anything like that, the minute taking from AI, particularly as it gets used to the accent, bit of work to do there with a few people in our office, including me. But yeah, that's a very simple adoption. And I think that's right, isn't it? Start small.
Yeah.
Get comfortable.
Yeah.
I think the team getting comfortable, because it's change management with your team as well, and anything new is scary. So start small, the team get used to it. Oh, we're using a bit of AI, don't feel scary, and then grade upwards. But that's one example that's tiny that's we've used.
You've got to bring people along on that journey. So if you're talking about the fear that people might have, starting small and getting people used to, look, this isn't going to here to replace you, but empower you.
Yeah.
That's 100% got to bear fruit.
Yes.
With the more that you develop and deliver.
Yeah, exactly. But I can see bigger potentials as we go on. I think the bit for us though, and any growing SME, is your data set.
Yeah.
It's so because, you know, Jimmy, when you're growing a business, it's not smooth, is it? And you end up with different ways of capturing your data and different using it on different platforms, and to bring it all into a nice set, nice and neat, that then an AI can properly use, is a task in itself.
Yeah.
So, you know, your CRM, everything like that. So I think we've got work to do on that front before then we'd be able to get the maximum capability from an AI.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like, I talk all the time about data silos, and no one's intentionally gone out to build the businesses and applications in the way it's occurred. That was just what was natural. As you grow and you adapt, you find something that fits, but then it slightly doesn't fulfill all the needs, and you get another one or another one. And I think if you were to say to a company, right, knowing what you know now, what product would you use, they'd probably start with a much simpler product set, and it'd be more all-encompassing anyway. And obviously technology's moved along to now we're doing as obviously a sister company, Dynamics 365, which I think addresses a lot of these issues from previous kind of tech bolt-ons and add-ons.
Yeah.
And I think most companies now, if they were to start fresh, would go down that route. Maybe not Dynamics, but a tool like that, which touched all areas of the business.
Yeah.
And had one set of data that it was just skinned and interacted with in different ways.
I think so. I think if I look back at our journey, you probably underestimate the importance of the data when you're earlier on in your journey, because it's not really a thing.
No.
You know, when you've got 5 clients or 10 clients or 20 clients, the data isn't, you know, it's not difficult. It's on one Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah.
As you get bigger and grow, and like you say, you bring in different apps and technology products, and you're capturing it in different ways, and you've got different members of the team inputting it from different departments, then, which is arguably too late, you start to realise that the collation and organisation and accessibility of that data is now quite important for us to get to the next level. Yeah. But you're having to go back a little bit to build it out.
I know you guys have hired a data analyst in the last, 12 months, 18 months?
A bit longer, 2 years maybe it might be.
So, because they talk about data is the new oil, don't they? Is one of the sayings.
I've not heard that.
So data is the new oil. Like, companies that are going to win, like going to thrive, are the ones that can manage data best. And, the apprentice company we use, data analyst is the fastest growing apprenticeship now.
Is that
because
right?
all of these companies have this data, like you say, they're pumping it out. They don't know what to do with it, or they can't use it because it's not been cleansed. And now people are like cluing up, right, we need to have a system, we need to have someone in-house that can help us with this. So I think companies that wise up to that earlier will go further quicker because they can make more meaningful progress. So
Yeah, well, that was our thinking as well. Is, I see Howarths as we've got a great brand, great reputation, a strong story, and we're a very people-based business. I think there's a big opportunity for us to bring our technology up to the same level. And I think Mel joining us, who's brilliant, our data analyst, is a part of that. Because if we can bring that side up to level that the people side is up, if you like, I think we're really onto something.
yeah.
So yeah, totally agree with that.
So just to flip that on its head then, let's say you were really good at the tech and not very good at people. What are your tips for getting started? Or let's say you've not really focused on the people side, so the kilt's the other way. How do you get started? What are your core go-tos to develop that?
Right, here's the truth about building a high-performance culture. It's really hard.
Yeah.
So very difficult to do and takes a long time. And here's the other good bit, the work never ends. You never get to a point where you say, high performance culture, tick, move on to the next to-do list. This is something that must be constantly worked at. But I would say all the best things in life are hard to do and take time. So you have to build it like a house with bricks. And you have to start where you are and build it up layer by layer to build the foundations of a great culture. And the work never stops and you have to be always on it. So I think the first thing to do is, if we agree that the destination is top line revenue, bottom line profit, return to shareholders, and a great place to work with a queue of people outside the door wanting to work there, the first step is, how far off are we that destination? So, for example, our HR growth team will, audit a business over 10 categories, employee engagement survey, give the board 2020 vision over where they're at, and then it's battle plans to get as close to that utopia as possible. So it depends where the business is at on its journey towards that outcome as to what the right next steps are. But I think fundamentally, a good place to start for me, if I was to stick my neck out, would be, if you don't have an articulated set of values, going back to what we talked about earlier, that's a great place to start, because that dictates a lot of the decision making in the business. Who you're going to recruit, the framework from which you make decisions, commercial decisions, incredibly important for so many reasons. So if you're going to start somewhere, on the premise that you've actually got yourself compliant, you've got contracts of employment, staff handbook, policies, all that good stuff first, then an articulated set of values would be a good place to start. But you layer up then, the culture, because it's all really relevant for increasing engagement levels, to increase productivity, to increase business success. That's the formula underneath. And, even things like time to work. How long does it take from someone to join the business to them being fully productive? Clearly, what the board wants is that time to be as reduced as possible. And you only do that through a great pre-boarding, onboarding, induction. So there's lots of bricks you can put on this house to build the high-performance culture. But I think it's first about, do we agree that's the aim? How far off are we? And then let's build 30-day, 60-day, 90-day battle plans to get as close to that as possible.
We're obviously a lot more towards the start of that journey. It's something we prioritize and we want to be. We pick the destination. We're putting the bricks down. But what I'd say is sometimes hard to, because you're seeing it through your own eyes, as to know how far away you are on those things. And especially when you can be doing different roles. You can, it's a roller coaster running a business, isn't it? You have literally these wins, and then you have these days where you're like, how were we here when we were here yesterday? I think it's super hard to keep a level and see everything through like a neutral set of eyes and viewpoints to then know where you're at. Like, how do you help people, I guess? Is it a bit of a culture shock for some people when you go in initially and say, look, you might actually think you're here, but we think you're down here? Or... Yeah,
exactly. That discovery session, after you've done the audit engagement survey, can be a tricky balance because the board or the MD, and every MD loves their business. You have to, don't you, to do the role. So to go in there and say, actually, there's quite a few people who work in this business who don't think it's as great as you do, then that's not always easy to take. But at the end of the day, I say to boards, what do you want? Do you want a sugar-coated version or do you want the truth?
Yeah.
And I think, to your point, how do you know how far off you are? Well, the team hold the truth. So whatever we might think at board level is one thing, but what do the people who make this business truly think?
Yeah.
And that's where you do your employee engagement surveys, get your score and results, and look, the reality is, do we ever reach 10 out of 10 with everyone who works for the business? No. But does that mean we shouldn't strive for it and try? So a good vantage point, I think, is the engagement levels of the team. And then what you will see is, because engagement levels are higher, productivity is higher, and the business is more successful as a result.
Yeah.
So you should feel the difference in the business over a right period of time.
I think it's a bit like technology adoption. Once you've seen it in like premise working and you can feel the benefit, you're going to lean into it more and more, aren't you? But I can see how it'd be hard to get that ball rolling.
You need your quick wins, don't you? Which is same for you as well. It's 100%. Like there's some low-hanging fruit when you're working on culture things that you can do fairly quickly, give everyone confidence onto the bigger things. Yeah.
All right, perfect. So if people are interested in speaking to you or the team about getting help, getting started, what's the best way they can go about doing that?
Anyway, you can ring us, email, website, come to Clackheaton for a Greg's and Wetherspoons. We'll get a pasty in and put the kettle on. Yeah, we're available on all. And LinkedIn, as you said, I use a lot. So LinkedIn, website, it'd be great for anyone who wants to take that journey or is serious about building a high-performance culture and obviously staying compliant on employment law, health and safety.
Yeah.
Then, we'd be delighted to help.
Perfect. And my closing tradition then is, what's one piece of tech, software, or an application that either in your personal life or your work life you could no longer live without?
Oh, I brought it with me. My Remarkable. If there's anyone watching this from Remarkable, I want commission for the amount I've talked about this. You know what? So I used to have 3 or 4 different notebooks.
Yeah.
That I'd write notes in, which was fine. But since I've got this now, all in one place, searchable. So the other week, I was looking for notes that I made 3 months ago with a particular prospect. Search function, type it in, notes straight up. So my Remarkable is my number one.
I must admit, I obviously saw yours. I'd been on the fence about it, but I was like, do you know what? I'm going to take the leap. And as you can see, I've now got one as well. And it's the same, like, I use it every day, like multiple times a day. Like, I don't know if I could live without it now.
Right. So if there's anyone watching from Remarkable, that's the first sale from me. So can I have my cut?
But now I think it's a perfect example of, again, how technology, even if it's not really complex, just something so simple, all it does is replicate paper.
Yeah.
But look how much you've engaged with it and look how much you use it now.
Exactly. And the other point I'd make about the Remarkable is it keeps it simple. Yeah. And I think there's a good business lesson in that. They could have the functionality to take pictures, get on the internet, etc. It doesn't do any of that.
Yeah.
It just allows you to write notes, but it does it really well.
Yeah.
And I really like that adage for business, is really specialising in what you're good at.
Yeah. Not being a jack of all trades.
100%.
Yeah. I think it's hard, isn't it? When you start out, you don't want to say no ever, but there's power in saying no, and there's power in just working with the right people and aligning yourself to the right groups. So yeah, that's good. Perfect. Thank you very much for being a guest.
Not at all. Loved it. Thank you.
That's all for this episode of the Tech Remedy podcast. I hope you found it insightful and have some useful takeaways for your business. Please don't forget to share the podcast with anybody else it may help and subscribe for future episodes to come.